Well, good evening, everybody. It sounds like we have sound, we have an audience, we have a moderator, we have a program. I think we're ready to go. This is, by my count, the 28th Edina Reads program since its inception in 2004. Some of you might remember that it started out as a one-book-a-year program, and it turned out to be so successful that the committee decided to have several a year, and we depend largely on the Edina Library to help fill the schedule. Edina Reads is, as our bookmark indicates, a collaborative program hosted by the Edina Community Foundation that I, Dick Rockett, the Executive Director, represent, and Maureen Millay-Smith, reference librarian that the Edina Library represents. We get support from the Friends of the Edina Library, a lot of support, including hosting the table for tonight, but also by the Community Education, Edina Community Education Services in the Edina School District, Edina High School, and the Senior Center, as well as a new partner, the League of Women Voters. And then for tonight, we have a very special host, the Edina Human Rights Relations Commission. So to help those of you who came just for the book program tonight understand how special you are, I'd like everybody who's involved with one of those sponsor organizations to raise your hand. All of you. And we're all here because we know how good the program is going to be. And we're glad you're here to join us. Tonight, very briefly, I'm going to introduce Maureen and have her give you a few housekeeping and announcements from the Edina Library.
Good evening. It's always my job to do the housekeeping work. I want to greet you from my senior librarian, Tony Miller, and from our director, Lois Linger-Thompson. And I want to thank the Friends of the Edina Library for their ongoing support. This weekend is their big book sale. It will begin at 10 a.m. on Saturday and close at 5, and reopen on Monday at 10 a.m. and close at 5. I'm correct about that, on Monday. And it's a bag sale on Monday, $5 a bag. It'll be a wonderful sale, and the weather will be much better than this, I gather. So thank you all for coming out. If there were an emergency in this room, we would just go out that exit. And there's a restroom here, and there's a restroom at the far end of the building, and there are restrooms upstairs, and there are water fountains at each of them. Those are like the two most important things I have to say. But another big thing is we have two Edina Reads programs coming up in June. One is Connie Brockway and Susan K. Law, romance writers, good friends, and they will be speaking for our summer fete, and that will be at the Braemar Golf Course in the clubhouse, and that will be at 7 on June 17th. And it will be much nicer, I promise, I hope. I hope it isn't a one-day summer. And then on June 24th, Wayne Jorgensen will be here. That's a Monday. It will be in this room at 7 as well. And he will discuss his book, Every Man Did His Duty, about the men of the 1st Regiment Minnesota Volunteer Infantry. It was the first volunteer regiment offered in service to President Lincoln after the fall of Fort Sumter. It's a really interesting book, and it's a big summer. It's the 150th anniversary of Gettysburg, and he will be at that event. And finally, in May, I am still promising good weather. On May 6th in this room, we will have a Great Decisions program, and Dr. Ellen Kennedy, who is with World Without Genocide, will speak. She will be speaking on Myanmar and Southeast Asia. The program will begin at 4:15. There should be plenty of room, but I'm still having people register because I'm obsessive. And with that, I'm handing the podium back to Richard.
Thank you. It's clear that Maureen has been really affected by the weather.
Yes.
And it reminds me that on my way here tonight, I was thinking about the weather being a bully of sorts, and how I felt like I and all of us were being bullied by the weather. And then I realized that that's not really a fair analogy, because bullying is much worse because it's personal. You know, there isn't one person who's making this weather come down on us, and the weather is directed kind of to all of us. But if it were personal, in the sense of personally delivered to you personally, it would be much more serious. Luckily, that's not the case. But our program tonight is about personal bullying. It comes from an idea that Lisa Finsness suggested right back here. Thank you, Lisa, to the Human Rights Relations Commission. And as I mentioned, we're pleased to have the Human Rights Relations Commission as a major sponsor of the event. And Arnie Bigby, current member of the commission, is here to give you a few words.
Thank you, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I love this community. I love our state. I really enjoy libraries. That's where I take my grandkids, and we have some time, and we don't want to cook. If we want to cook, then we have to go to the kitchen. But they love the libraries. It's a place for them to have fun and to learn. And our community here tonight is just another example of a place I've learned to love, having lived here since had a home here since 2004. So I'm really delighted to be a part of this community, and I think this is one of the best communities in the state of Minnesota. And we can make it even better with all the things we're doing. And the Human Rights and Relations Commission is just delighted to be able to partner with some great organizations, you know, the library, the League of Women Voters, the school district, and others. We've got such a great cadre of volunteers, people that want to help and do the work that it takes to make this a better community. We've, as a Human Rights and Relations Commission, because it's an area of interest, our gay lesbian community that's been rising to the surface over the past several years. We started with a domestic partnership ordinance, which we recommended and the City Council endorsed, and we got more information about the bullying issues. When I was a kid, I played violin because there was a violin under the bed, and when I got old enough, then they took it out from under the bed and they said, well, it's time for you to play this. So I learned how to play the violin, but when you go to a kind of a tough high school in the city of Minneapolis and you're carrying a violin around after school, you learn how to get home fast. And that was a form of bullying, you know, the taunting and some of the ridicule. So I think all of us put up with that in one way or another, and it's just a continuing part of our educational process to put that in focus and have people know that we're all part of a caring community that wants to really build relationships, build people, provide our future leaders and all of that. And Richard, do I turn it back to you again? Thank you very much. We're just delighted to be here with all these folks.
You know, just to satisfy your curiosity and to take advantage of an opportunity to highlight a little irony, the young children, and they are children, the young boys you see coming through here are ironically attending in the Edina Senior Center a class on gun safety. On the same night we're talking about bullying, I think it's safe to say that these young people, when they go through the course on gun safety, will know how not to use a gun for bullying. That's not the purpose of their learning about guns. It is to make sure that they are safe and responsible owners. But they are meeting here in the Senior Center, coincidentally, with our program. We're blessed tonight to have another common feature of Edina Reads as part of this program, and that's our, what's the best word? Commonly available moderator. We have somebody who's made a career out of directing reading presentations and moderating. Betsy Cussler is here for maybe the third or fourth Edina Reads program within the last couple of years. Her prior career was as an English teacher at Edina High School, and through that she met many young people interested in reading, some who've turned out to be authors in their own right, and some of whose works we've selected for Edina Reads program with Betsy as a moderator. We keep coming back to her, and we keep getting good programs. So we're all lucky tonight to have her. Betsy, the program is yours.
Thank you. As Dick said, I made my living for 35 years talking about books, and it's wonderful to have a chance now that I'm retired to do that now and then, because it is something that I enjoy, and don't we all? However, this is not a class that I am going to direct. There aren't a lot of right answers that I want to make sure you see. It's not like teaching Hamlet. There are no grades. And typically what I like to do on occasions like this, first, before I start, I want to say how grateful I am to this community for the collaborative effort, in this case against bullying, which this evening represents. I think much of the bullying takes place in the schools because some of the most vulnerable people are youth, and that's where they are. I think by the time we get to be in our 20s and 30s, we have developed some skills for resisting bullies and some competencies. But when you're 10 and carrying a violin case, you don't quite know how to deal with that. So I'm very pleased that the school has signed on to this as well. Typically what I do on occasions like this is, and I do have my agenda, my lesson plan as it were, but I know a lot of you have read this book, and I try to find out at the beginning what it is that you would like to talk about. What are the topics raised by the book, which you agree with or don't agree with? What are the aspects of bullying that you have encountered in your own experiences, that you remember from your childhood, that you have witnessed, that your children have witnessed and reported to you? Do you have any things that you are hoping we will talk about tonight? And I will just jot them down. We won't discuss them now. But that way I want to make sure that the concerns that have brought you here get addressed. I think usually you can hear me. I will try to make sure that when people participate from the floor, and you have a handheld, and we can pass that around or whatever. So I'm going to abandon this for a moment. What are some of the concerns that you hope we deal with tonight? Any? Yes, Lonnie.
Is bullying as generational as it appears in this book? The idea that it was passed from father to son?
That question?
The question is,
Or do you want to do it yourself?
I wanted to know whether bullying is as generational as it appears in this book, where it seems to have been passed from father to son.
and anything that you don't hear, if you just raise your hand, I will know that that means that the comment from this side of the room didn't carry to that back corner, and vice versa, and I will either repeat it or get somebody to repeat it. Very nice question. Other thoughts, questions, topics? Okay, I'm not going to start there. I want to start with something else that the writer says early in the book. He says that they have moved to this community. East Princeton, I'm on page 13. East Princeton is about 3/4 native-born white, with an assortment of different-looking people sprinkled among us. This is perfect diversity to the modern white suburbanite. A few people from everywhere on the globe, but no group numerous enough to constitute a rival community. No one living in East Princeton is from East Princeton, and so on. And even earlier, he has said that his parents moved there because it was the kind of suburb that everybody wanted to live in. And one aspect of that, problem with library books is you can't underline them. The problem, he says, the thing about it that made it appeal to people was that there were no minorities. Everybody was white, middle class. My question to you is, in your experience and as you look at this book, to what extent is ethnicity, race, minority status an aspect of bullying? As you have witnessed it, and are even geeks a minority? Well, you know, people with thick glasses and violin cases. Where's Arnie? Forgive me for pouncing on that, but that idea, who are the kids who get bullied? And they aren't the captains of the football team. They are, or the hockey team, or the, you know, who gets bullied?
I was bullied as a 12-year-old white boy growing up in northern North Dakota by a 13-year-old white boy growing up in North Dakota. And I was bullied as a university attorney by a vice president of the same institution, also white. So in my case, there wasn't much ethnicity to bully, but it didn't need to be there.
And why were they bullying you, or why did they think you were vulnerable?
They were both more interested in power trips as a way of identifying themselves.
Okay. Why do people bully? To validate themselves and to elevate themselves. And they think you look like a good stool on which they can stand in order to do that. Other thoughts about bullying? Why did some of the, yes?
I just think fear. I think if you boil down any behavior or thought or action, it boils down to either this so basic of love or fear. And so the bully is afraid of something. They're low self-esteem, they're afraid of something. And they think that they can get some power. But that's fear. So fear.
Do you think how do you think what you just said relates to the character in this book called The Dog?
Sadly, I was unable to get the book. I tried so many times to go and get it, and I failed.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, I think that in this book, a lot of it is like that's all they know. Like the boy Jack, is that his name? It seems like his dad just kind of taught him how to act, and so he became a bully. It wasn't really the fear or anything like that.
Can I play the devil's advocate, and let's approach this from two ways? You said his father taught him how to act. I would say his father didn't teach him how to act, and that's why he became a bully. And I think we're both right. So I'd like you to...
I think it kind of goes to the same point with that is all he knows. So his dad might not have like taught him how to act. But
Can you hear her?
That's
They would like you to use this.
that's what he saw. I don't know what else to say. Okay, I said that I don't think his dad taught him how to act really, just like directly, but that's what he saw in his dad, and so then he became a bully because of it.
Can you tell me bullying behavior of the fathers that you think the son saw?
Ooh. There you go. Yeah.
I saw like name calling, like when the Dallas Cowboys, he was calling them names, then he picked up as a son when he went to the baseball game, calling them names.
Okay, name calling, very good. And of course, the therapist ultimately says to him, "You would send a whole 747 full of people into a crash just because some of them were Cowboys fans?" But it's that kind of thinking or non-thinking that leads to bullying behavior. That mostly non-thinking. Yes, okay, very good. Any other instances where you saw the father? You guys are great. This is why I miss teaching.
He also, when Jack was bullying the little boy. And the neighbor came over and said, "You need to discipline your son," but he didn't do anything about it. He just kind of let it happen. Or when he got like suspended, or when he got like in trouble on the bus, he just kind of like laughed it off.
Which, to a certain extent, was the not parenting part that I was coming. I think we have a little bit of both of that, or a lot of both of it. Yes.
I thought it was interesting how there was this one scene where he beat his son, and like the kid was like 4 years old for I think he was like for touching the yearbook or something, and he remembered it differently afterwards, like the father did. And I thought it was interesting how in that one instance the father overreacted and like reacted violently, and like as a young kid that probably affected how Jack saw the world, and like kind of the idea that power allows you to do anything and also allows you to like change how you saw it, as like the father didn't remember it afterwards.
As someone once said, history is always written by the victors, and they write it their way. And even if it's the history of family encounters, we're going to have Dad's version of this rather than the other one. Did any of the rest of you find this man an absolutely appalling parent? And what got the hair on your head, back of your neck standing up?
Because he never guided his child at all in any way. Didn't matter what they did, and he'd find some stuff funny, and it was awful, and that was it. There was no guidance, no parental guidance or teaching.
So this really does go back to Lonnie's question, and perhaps the possibility that people who have been bullies in their own growing up years may enable bullying. You had a comment.
Yeah, I should say that I'm one of Arnie's army here. So, something that I had to guard against was stereotyping based on geography. You know, we all watched and enjoyed Tony Soprano, and this was set in the same physical locale. And I think one of the great tragedies is that so much of it, I think the author intended to portray more or less of I'll call it a minor league parallel in behavior between the exaggerated behavior in that television series. And I think we have to be on guard to recognize that this is not behavior that's localized by geography, by race, by economic status, or the rest of it. So I would caution against that kind of stereotypical behavior. I thought that the relationship as described between he and the therapist was yet another parallel between Tony Soprano and his therapist, although not nearly as intense and not nearly as well drawn. But in conclusion, I think that the problem that we have here is, again, stereotyping based upon either geography or the white male, inattentive, ineffective, non-parent parenting style.
Thank you. I clearly need to brush up on my Sopranos. And you just wonder how much of his portrayal, since this is the milieu in which he grew up, does just kind of come naturally, but I'm sure can find parallels even in the world of Minnesota Nice. Dick.
Since you suggested the role of a devil's advocate, I want to do that a little bit with you.
Please.
Because you made an earlier reference to the fact that a lot of bullying takes place in schools. That is not the thinking of the Human Rights Relations Commission in sponsoring this program. I think what they got out of the book was that it portrayed a lifelong situation of being vulnerable to bullying. It may be that, as I mentioned my first case, it was by a fellow student, but it had nothing to do with the school. I mean, I suppose students are bullied to the extent that they're young and vulnerable. but there's a lot of bullying that takes place in families, which the book tells about. There's a lot of bullying that takes place in the workplace, which is reflected in this book. So the school is not the villain here. And I'm not saying that just because I'm sitting next to the superintendent, but I do think it's important, and apparently Lisa wants to add to this, to understand that the hope for this program tonight is for all of us to understand and agree the scope of bullying in the community, the potential for bullying in the community in general, and not just for young people, and certainly not just in schools.
And it was not certainly my intention at all to blame the schools. There's a chapter in here called "The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round," and that was one of the focus points of his presentation. No, thank you, but all right. So let's talk about adult bullying then. So you kids don't feel you're the only ones that get bullied. How does adult bullying play out in your lives and communities?
One of the things that strikes me in the book, and I don't know whether the author consciously chose to focus on the father and the son relationship, but it's implied in the background that he's bullying his wife too. You know, that she cannot stand up against what he believes is okay for this kid to do. And so I think when we look at relationships, there's bullying within relationships.
And to what extent is it just not wanting confrontation that leads people to accede to being bullied? Either because they don't think they can go up against the bully, or it isn't worth it. I mean, that's an interesting relationship, which I don't think it goes into, except that the shrink says, do you think you and your wife could be your best friend? Oh, no. That's kind of scary. True, I mean, but that's not certainly what you want out of a relationship, is somebody who is not your best friend and never could be.
Thank you. One of the reasons why this book was chosen is because it does have about 15 different chapters and thoughts that look at different aspects of bullying, some of them from the child's or teenager's perspective, but mostly the relationships between adults. And for those of you who have read it, you may have found that that was sort of subtle, just like this implication that Lonnie's saying about the wife. You may not even know that until you discussed it or thought a little bit more about it, that was actually occurring. And so the thought behind bringing this group together was to look at ways that adult bullying can happen in the workplace, in the community, in your neighborhood, where it's happened, where Dick has said that's happened to me as well from other adults in community as well as work environments, and to some of my colleagues. And so that is the pervasive part of bullying that is maybe, as Lonnie is suggesting, generational too, and maybe not. You don't know what happens or what makes a person become a bully. Bullies can gang up together and pick on a person, and be very subtle about it as well. So, I believe that in this book the chapters sort of illustrate various examples of bullying that that maybe I know that before I read the book I hadn't thought about as deeply.
And I will declare that I'm Rick Justin, superintendent, and I don't know if we're going to be on time or not for school tomorrow, but saying that, I know I have some advocates knowing which way they want to go. I think it's going to be important as we get into the discussion that we define bullying versus abuse versus harassment. And in the school district, we have a real clear definition around what's perceived and distress that alters a performance. And so that's something. I think the other thing is we have some very good news. Again, it's the young people, I think, who are going to show us the greatest light. While there is bullying that goes on every day in schools, the days of some of the hazing that has been historical that we accepted as young people when we were growing up, you know, and if we wore the freshman beanie, we know what I'm talking about, to what happened when you got various clubs, those things aren't being accepted. Where you sit on the bus is to be a safe spot. I mean, our young people are taking some very strong stands with their peers. Our challenge is the electronic means. That becomes very invisible. And that's another one that I think they would have better expertise than some of us around how that does occur. But the great hope is the communication and the problem solving that our young people are doing, I think, can help, and we can learn from them along the way on this whole very challenging issue of bullying.
Thank you. One of the things, as I was thinking about bullying, and we can get into electronic cyberbullying, although I will confess I know less about that. Forgive me, I'm old. But in a bullying situation, there are three people. There's the bully. There is frequently the bully's sidekick. And we certainly saw that with Jack and his friend. And it was a tandem operation. And immediately, of course, it's 2 against 1. And so there's the bully and maybe the bully's sidekick, both of whom are doing this bullying behavior. There is the victim. And I would suggest that frequently the victim is someone who is different. We have had a lot of bullying of gays and lesbians and people who are being bullied because less now, you know, where we have the Gay Straight Alliance, and I don't know what is it still called the Gay Straight Alliance at the high school? We have laws being made in terms of protecting adults from being discriminated against in the workplace and so on. This is just becoming much more, maybe I think easier to fight, because instead of being this silent social acceptance of stigmatizing, it's just not there anymore. Instead, there is a very vocal social statement that we are who we are. But there's frequently something different about the victim. The third person in this equation is the bystander. And it seems to me in any work that we try to do with bullying, it doesn't work to preach to the victim. He knows he's the victim. He doesn't know what to do about it, or she doesn't know what to do about it, and wishes he or she did. But there you are. Preaching to the bullies doesn't work. It seems to me if we want to make inroads in various situations, whether it's the workplace, whether it's the cafeteria, wherever it is, that the audience that we need to engage in this are the bystanders. People who are not going to say, this is not my problem and I'm getting out of here before it becomes my problem. People who enable, people who don't take a stand. Years ago at Edina High School, after lunch, they all came running back. Oh, Mrs. Cussler, you should have seen what happened in the cafeteria. What happened? Well, a couple kids were starting to gang up on somebody else. And another student, now he happened to be a student with a fair amount of clout. He was an athletic star. He was a wonderful kid. And he simply went up and he said, we're not going to do that. That was it. It ended. Now, having the confidence to do that is a rare thing. But if one person has that, that too can be contagious. And that, I think, is something that maybe if we can foreground it, the same thing in an office situation. If someone is being harassed, bullied, intimidated, whatever, and someone else takes the risk, and it can be a very real risk of saying, this isn't right, and I think actually we have some codes and some mission statements and some various other things that say that this is not allowed. I think if we can mobilize bystanders and maybe be bystanders when things like this come up, that's a key to all of this. I would like to talk about the dog. I found him a somewhat enigmatic figure. I found his suicide enigmatic at first. Why did he do it? What does it tell us about him? And is he a thinking man's bully? Is there I guess there's such a thing. What did you make of the dog? Maureen?
I remember there was a scene on the beach, and the two boys, Jack and the other friend, didn't realize it was a gay beach, and the dog did. And although he doesn't really explore it thematically that much, I think that the dog had pretty deep issues. And the fact that he did not like the fact that Jack was getting so close to the girl about music.
Not Jack.
Not Jack. Who?
Macduff.
Macduff.
Yeah,
Macduff.
Jack's
Excuse
father.
me.
Other thoughts? Yes. Speak up real loud, and I'm coming with help.
I thought that he used the idea of the thinking man's bully as kind of a defense mechanism almost, and like to keep himself in denial, as if to say that he wasn't actually like the bad guy, but more of a person who's trying to toughen other people up, and like saying that he was like using those like terms like I am unstuck in time. It made him seem more like it made him seem more intelligent, and like I felt like he had a lot of self-esteem issues because every time he bullied the people that he respected the most, like the one girl, like Macduff said that he bullied her most because he respected her most, and his best friend was the one that he thought of as next to nothing because he wouldn't do anything. So I think that showed a lot of like his issues with like people who he might consider rivals or like his equals. He wanted to like make them feel lower so that way he could feel better.
Like natural selection.
Yeah.
Does any of you recognize the author told us where Unstuck in Time came from. Came from Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. Okay, you just read that. So if he is seeing himself in terms of Billy Pilgrim, what does that tell you?
Billy Pilgrim was like kind of unstable, and like he thought he could like see beyond it, like
Unstable.
He thought he could like see beyond like the values of war into like that what was it, Trafalgar?
Yeah.
Kind of like each individual moment is permanent, and that you can't change the future or the past no matter what you do.
And
Yeah.
and what unstuck him in time? Well, what horrific experience did he live through? War. And for those of you it's a great book, Slaughterhouse-Five. He is trapped in a slaughterhouse, in a subterranean slaughterhouse during the bombing of Dresden. That is why he survives, because the whole rest of the city is firebombed. And eventually they crawl out, but they have seen such horrific violence visited on one human being or group of human beings by another that he kind of says, I can't live in this world anymore. And I think to a certain extent that the dog is one of these people that has seen violence, his own and other people's, and the violence that he is able to incite other people to do. And it has just and at one point, when the one person who does stick by him, even though he doesn't respect him, says, you can't treat me that way, the next night he shoots himself. So I think that seeing yourself as a Billy Pilgrim is not it's not a sign of mental health.
And I think also it may have played into his suicide, thinking that once you're dead, you're not really dead, like the ideology in Billy Pilgrim said. Like dog didn't think that he'd actually be dead.
Or if you're not really alive.
So he may have killed himself thinking that he won't actually be dead.
I felt like too it was part of his self-delusion that what he was doing was helpful to society, right? By thinning the herd and culling the weak, that he was providing a useful service to those around him by making the strong stronger, and was probably part of what he had to do to justify that to himself on a day in, day out basis.
Would you say stronger and also more calloused? That's part of the strength, that he's less feeling, more just law of the jungle and so on, which would go along with that. Other thoughts and questions. Why do you think the dog's parents, what do you think that scene at the beginning of the book was all about? Where he goes over and he says, I've written a book, I want you to take a look at it. And they're talking about what was the dog's favorite song. And his parents think it was one thing, and he says, no, it was Diamond Smile or Diamond Smile. And Diamond Smile was the song of the girl who found life so unbearably painful that she killed herself. And just, of course, as he's about to say that, he realizes this swamp that he has waded into, and he says, when she looks at life, she decides to leave it. He can't bring himself to say she commits suicide and so on. But this was his favorite song. And I think that part of what the problem of the dog was that he saw, yes, he participated, but that he saw all of this cruelty and so on in the world. He was himself a kind of a victim. Would you agree with that, or did you just think he was a bad guy? Lonnie.
I'd rather yield to the teenager, but okay. I think that he was part victim, and I think that's part of Macduff's problem, that he understands that he used the dog, that the dog was his sidekick, as Betsy said. And so he does feel guilty, but he doesn't want to feel guilty because he shouldn't feel guilty because he's a bully. And he's culling the herd and he's thinning all the rest. And so he shouldn't have to feel guilty.
Now I'll give you a turn.
I actually didn't think of him as much of a victim because, like, I felt like the way that he used all like the language of like I'm unstuck in time and like constantly quoting other books about how he's like thinning the herd and everything. I felt like he used that as like his mechanism, and that he had so imbibed himself with that kind of ideology that by the time that someone had like called him out on like the fact that it's sorry, that it's not true. He just couldn't handle it, and like Macduff said that he didn't think that the dog wanted to face another day in which like basically like the veneer had kind of come off, and when the dog realizes that no, it's not, I'm not a thinking man's bully, I'm just a bully. I felt like that was kind of like he couldn't handle anymore, and that's why he committed suicide. Because like I think in his suicide note he still mentioned the fact that he was unstuck in time and everything, and I felt like that was like kind of him holding on to his ideology and the fact that he was still trying to be a thinking man's bully. Oh, sorry.
Well, I think the dog was kind of a victim of himself, but he definitely didn't see himself that way because he didn't act like a victim. He kind of just went out on other people and didn't really take much time to talk about himself or anything, but he kind of had a lot of problems making relationships with people and just sort of messed up his own mind in a way. I don't really know where to go with that. Maybe someone else has an idea.
That's all right. We all talk ourselves into those dead ends. I do it all the time. Yes.
I was really interested in the role of isolation and how when he became isolated in the end of that, he couldn't take it. And then that also played a little bit of a prevalence earlier when we were talking about like the segregation and that they had self-segregated and that role of isolationism and allowing people to be isolated as a form of bullying or not allowing but forcing people into isolation.
One of the things that I thought, and it doesn't come out until rather late in the book, but which I thought was very sad. Remember how this kid lived. I mean, he got up and he had a shower and he ate breakfast and he went to school every day and he came home and they played hockey. But you remember how he spent every night? He never slept. So this does very bad and dangerous things to your head. But he would go down into New York or into Newark or I don't remember which city, and I don't know that it matters. But which was it? New York, down into New York, and he had his favorite dealer. He had a woman in a high chair. Listen to me. Well, this time last night, my husband and I were at Methodist Hospital attending the birth of our most recent grandchild. So my thoughts are on high chairs. I'm sorry. I didn't mean high chair. I meant wheelchair. Yes, little Mateo is not even 24 hours old at this point, but there's this woman who is obviously a loner, probably what we would call a homeless person. Probably she is homeless, that used to grab his crotch, but she's no threat. She's in the wheelchair. And the third person was some sort of philosopher. I'm hazy. Who remembers? What? That's right, and that they had taken his kingdom away from him. Yeah, he was not a philosopher. This is crazy behavior. This really is somebody who is, as he says, unstuck in time, unburdened by convention, and liberated from fact. I don't know about the last part. But this is very unhealthy behavior. I think he's hanging by a thread. And every time he's able to put somebody else down, it sort of reinforces his own position. Now, I want to come back to your statement that we want to look at bullying behavior at all levels of society and in all, not just on school buses, but in offices and in families and so on. I think the dog was as much of a loner as any of those other people, and it was bully or be bullied. And he thought, as long as I get there first and get the upper hand, I don't know. What did you think about the author of this book? And now, not the author, but the narrator. We will allow that distance, and we will allow the narrative voice which he adopts. How did you react to someone who began by saying, one night a few years ago, not that, that's the acknowledgement. My best friend from high school blew his brains out at the end of our junior year. There's a real dissonance in that sentence. My best friend from high school blew his brains out. There is such a tonal disconnect. If he were your best friend, would you describe it with that language? And what does that language tell us? I found this voice very hard to listen to because I felt it was a brutal voice. It was a voice that had very little respect for any other human beings, even someone who was so distressed that he just gave up on life and went and sat out in the park with stolen chairs. I mean, at least the dog was true to himself. He didn't sort of get religion at the last minute and start behaving like a law-abiding citizen. He stole the chairs. He stole the beer that he was drinking. We don't know where he got the gun, probably illegally, and so on. But the whole tone of this, and so often when he was with the therapist, he would say things, and she would just wait him out until he got that smart aleckiness out of his system. And she would say, now this is what I asked you, and you tried to deflect it with this smart alecky remark. What was your reaction to this man who was telling us his story? Did you like him?
At times I found it a very hard book to read because of what you just said, because of him, because of the author, because of the way it's written. It was tough.
Yes.
Absolutely tough, and it was him all the time.
Very egocentric, yes. Very narcissistic. And you felt like if I were at a party with this man, I would say, well, it's been great. And I would end that conversation. I would not want to pursue it. Yes, Arnie.
I think in some respects that personality, it's a bit of a mirror for us. I mean, I'd like to just deny that. I'm a really good guy, and that's not me. But one of the things I've always said is, in my community, I want everybody to be accepted and respected and have full participation. And then I get into a conversation with somebody who's anti-gay, anti-lesbian, and other things.
Anti all the good things.
And I find myself not being respectful and having a real battle to keep it in a conversation and not personal. And I could guess I'm the only person in this room that ever does that, but it's part of our human condition, You know, we get things that happen in our lives that make it that way. But I think conversations like this, experiences that we all have, put us in a position to just understand that. And I keep looking for those experiences that help me, and the book helps that, you know. So as much as I thought the book was pretty edgy, and I'm reading it and I didn't like it, I didn't want to finish it, but I did. And I think it's in some ways we're just lifting up that little edge and we're peeking into our own souls, and that's the real. For me, that's where enlightenment comes in this. I learned from that, but and then from being in this conversation with other people that are listening and hearing.
I just had trouble with the way the book was written. It was written like it was a memoir, and it wasn't. It was a fiction, and it was weird. I felt that it was just hard to read it.
When you say it was fiction, you do not believe this was in any way autobiographical?
I don't really think so. I think he denied that it was.
Okay, I actually called the author. And he explained to me that he is a father of 3 boys, and his youngest boy was being bullied. And he called and went over to meet the father of the bully. And he said the man was actually quite likable. He wasn't, but he sort of said, like, come on, you don't want your kid to be, you know, a sissy. You know, he's got to toughen up versus I'll speak to my child about the child's behavior. And then you may have noticed his nephew is in the book, the image. He lost his nephew to suicide. That's what the publisher told me. So these were very strong topics, and I guess he chose a strong and somewhat unreliable narrator, but he was a very gentle man on the telephone, and he had to come in from the garden. So he was really a sweet man, but I think he really captured the nature of this kind of a personality, possibly.
And it's okay, and it sounds like this, you know, writers always look around them and find people, and it sounds like this father of the bullier, it was one of the ways that he created this unpleasant narrator. Yes.
And what I didn't like about him, among many things, was, in effect, he was bullying when he condoned his son's bullying. And the same with the father, you know, that contacted it. And I mean, that's just as bad, just allowing it to go on and thinking, oh, yeah, my kid's, you know, my kid's tough, yeah. But it's bullying on its own. Yeah.
He reminded me of the toughness. The biggest bully I ever met was a guy who was an adult, very sarcastic and tough. And I know there are probably a lot of hockey fans in here, but there was this sports, we haven't connected the sports thing here and being tough. And the biggest bully I've ever met, I worked with, he was a teacher. He was a fire teacher and a coach. And he used sarcasm and teasing and, you know, but towards kids that didn't always understand sarcasm and teasing. And to me, he was an adult bully. So I think some of the joking and all of that I heard from, you know, my past experience with this person. That you've got to be tough, and I don't know, I saw a connection too, and maybe somebody did else, with the hockey, the tough guy, some of the sports that, you know, seem to require more of that toughness.
Because that was one of their vehicles when they played those hockey games.
Yeah, that was very much used as a vehicle for that. I forget what it was that I read. It's been years, but it was not about hockey. It was about football, and it was somebody who was a big a guard, and at some point there's an authorial comment that says these were the best years of his life. Oh, I know what it was. My gosh, it was The Great Gatsby. It's all coming back. It's been a while. And it's talking about Tom Buchanan, Daisy Buchanan's husband. And it said there were people at Yale who hated him, but Fitzgerald's comment about him is the best years of his life were when he was playing football for Yale, because then what he was supposed to do was to go out there and smash other people. And when he graduated and got into social situations, that really was not the game he was supposed to be playing. But even when when Nick comes over for dinner, and it talks about how he steered him, took him by the elbow and steered him around and so on. And it was this idea of someone for whom physical force was the language he understood best and the game at which he was a star. And when the opportunity to do that with sanctioned rules was over, he was like a fish out of water. And I think that there's something of that with these sports where violence really is a part of the game. And it's what good players do well. That's what makes them good at it. And there are some dangers in that as a way when you're bringing up kids.
I would be interested to see what people thought about chapter 14, the Greek, when the Greek family moved into the neighborhood, and the narrator was sort of upset with the way this family lived their life in their lawn. And then there was an incident when Jack, the boy, hit or was accused of running into the little Greek boy, and on the surface, the boy, the dad made Jack apologize, but then when he went inside and rewarded him with ice cream. And I just was wondering what other people thought about that chapter, because for me that was one of the most pivotal chapters.
Thoughts? Oh, it happens.
I just wanted to go back to the sports really fast and the aggressiveness of like football and hockey. I kick for the high school team, and so I practice with them. And I think that a lot of the anger channeled in isn't anger so much as stress. Hanging out with the team, we all have so much going on, and I think that it's just a relieving tactic. And the rewarding aspect of like the violence of the game, or like going into it head-on tackling, I don't think it's a reward so much as something to do before you have to go home and do all your homework. It's more of a bonding aspect than rewarding for physical violence or bullying. So
certainly not to deny that, but I think in some cases, and particularly with some coaching, it could be channeled into directions that are not healthy. But yes.
Lisa brought up the point about the Greek family, which made me think about the concept of white privilege. And there's no better example of that than the sports hero Tom Buchanan, who's sort of the kind of the archetype of the white privilege, and I can do whatever I want because I'm white and I'm male and I can. So I just wanted to talk about that and how that feeds into this story as well.
And the antithesis of the white and the male and the privileged and the powerful is I am in a discriminated against, I'm in a minority, whatever kind of a minority, I am powerless, I don't have privilege, and those are the two opposites. And remember, we started this talking about how many victims are singled out because they are outside of the mainstream. So when this Greek family moves in next door, they've got Target written all over them. From the standpoint of Macduff and his son, who picks up on all of his father's cues. Yes. And we have to think about, I mean, my husband is an avid gardener. If he had somebody with dandelion seeds living next door to us, I shudder to think what might happen. He would go over and weed the lawn.
Well, here's an interesting example from a higher education setting. One of my first cases as a university lawyer was to advise a tenure committee that had received a complaint of equal opportunity violation by a tenured faculty member. The tenured faculty member was a distinguished scientist, a department head, and he was being accused of this violation by a junior Jewish faculty member who was upset by all the anti-Jewish jokes that this guy was telling. And I heard his defense stated clearly at the committee meeting, which is, no, he was not discriminating against us Jewish people. He told jokes like that about everybody. And what he was really saying is he wasn't, in his mind, a biased person. He was just a bully. That was his defense, only at that time we didn't know to label it that and probably didn't know what to do with it other than he was still responsible for the violation of the policy even if he did it to everybody. It also makes me think about a point made earlier that the bullying in his case was a way of relating to other people. He liked to show them that he had the sense of humor. He liked to show that he could control the social setting. He used it as a way of defining his superior relationship from a white privilege perspective. And the worst thing that can happen to a person like that is to be totally isolated. I mean, a bully needs that sidekick, a bully needs the victim, a bully needs the audience to act for, and if you take that all away from a bully, you've got trouble. I mean, the bully has trouble. That's what I think anyway. Right?
And these people that you call audience, that what I call bystanders, they have some complicity if what they do is stand around and seem to admire.
I think it was interesting that Macduff didn't even realize that his kid was bullying, and in fact he was proud of it because his kid was a badass like he was. So I mean, he just didn't even realize it in his adult life what a bully he was, or that his child's a bully.
One of the things I enjoyed most about this book were the short sessions with the therapist at the end, where little by little and step by step, he began to have some rather unpleasant insights about himself, including the one where he says, well, I guess I needed my son to be a tough guy. Well, and he did all the things that would turn his son into a tough guy, AKA bully, and so on. And going back to Lonnie's original question, is this generational and is it intentional? No. If you said to any parent, are you trying to turn your kid into a bully? Now let's just stop for a minute. Are all bullies boys? In this book, we only look at male bullying. We only look at male non-parenting, although Diane is a bit of a put my head under my wing and not do anything. But do we want to say anything about the tactics that girls and women use and how we can perhaps turn those around?
Exclusion. And when, and I think it goes to the parents as well. And it's behavior that some of these girls learn from their parents, the exclusion. And when a group of girls has, you know, a friend who all of a sudden is not part of the group, and none of the parents wonder why that girl doesn't come over anymore with the group. That's just something I've seen. The parents don't do anything about it.
This sort of silent acceptance of something where they probably do see that something is going on. Oh, we got everybody over in this corner wanting to talk about that.
Something I've learned about exclusion in teenagers is that by excluding other girls, I've seen the girls who are excluded become bullies themselves. And they use their exclusion as an excuse to be mean and rude towards other people. So it's just something more of a pass it on than if you don't exclude, you'll just kind of keep going. Like you'll still have people there. But by excluding other people, you're creating bullies, who then in turn will bully other people and create more.
A pecking order.
Yeah.
Yes, you pick on me, well, I will pick on somebody else, and so on.
With the exclusion thing being that I myself was bullied my freshman year in high school, it just led to, I don't know, I wasn't myself anymore, and just talking about it is just like, and it was just like I wasn't myself anymore, and I didn't talk to anybody, I didn't associate with anybody, I was just by myself.
And that's not fun.
It wasn't at all. And I feel like girls hit an emotional standpoint, like by picking like things that we don't feel confident in ourselves with or that we're having a hard time with. They pick that and they just go for it and they go for it and they go for it, and it just doesn't stop. And the more you're affected by it, or the more I was affected by it, the more they felt, I found my target, I'm going for it, it is what it is, and I'm just going to keep going because they're hurt now. And I can fulfill what I need inside myself by putting it out on somebody else.
And I ask how you turned that around?
I'm still working on it.
Good for you.
It's a work in progress.
I'm a lot older than you are, and I'll tell you, life is always a work in progress. We're all of us, and if we think we're not working on anything, we're probably not very interesting. We all need to keep working on things.
I've seen most often with girls that for bullying, they gossip. And I think if one starts gossiping with another girl, even if the other girl isn't saying anything, it's kind of hard to avoid because, I mean, if someone else hears both of them talking, or just even one of them talking to someone else, then they're associated as well, just for even listening. So I think that's one of the most common ways that girls like to bully is, and they don't even realize it because it's just everyday conversation. It's if something you saw and you're expressing your opinion about it, that it could get back to someone and really hurt their feelings. So it's very common and very hurtful, and that's how I've seen a lot of fights start, even within my friend group. So.
Also, like talking about gossip, I was thinking that like a lot of ways that girls bully is like by talking about a friend behind their back. And like I've experienced this myself, and it's kind of hard because you know that they're your friend, but then you hear these awful stuff that they're saying about you, and it's kind of like you don't know how to like react to that because it's behind your back, and like creating a confrontation would seem to like make it worse because it's like an actual fight. And so like I think the idea that like talking about someone behind their back kind of makes the person feel a bit more powerless because to react would be like to be the bad one who's like starting a fight, but then like you hear about this stuff and and I feel like that's a way that like beyond exclusion is like it can be like constant.
Going to gossiping again, like Taylor and you guys said, gossiping for girls is almost like one big giant game of telephone. I mean, honestly, like it could start out like so-and-so is talking to this guy and it could end with them dating for like a year in secret. Like that just happens and things are over exaggerated and it can really hurt. Like people can just be talking and it could be these two friends were debating whether or not the pizza at lunch was good and then it turns out that they aren't friends anymore It's crazy how things are twisted so fast within a day or within even 2 hours or a class period.
I was just going to ask the high school students here, because we have so many people here who are grandparents, and I think that, as Superintendent Dreesen said, there's a big gap about the bullying right now, because you can see it go on, but because of the social media and how things can be posted anonymously, it's different, it's harsher, it's crueler than it was for other generations. And so I'm just kind of wondering what you guys, if you have any thoughts or comments on that.
Well, I think with social media, it's kind of easy to control if you know how to, because like there are a lot of sites that let you post whatever you want anonymously, and I think they're kind of dumb. I don't know why anyone would put themselves up to that. And so I feel like as long as you work to educate yourself about how social media works, you can avoid the bullying, or most of it.
How are you going to keep somebody from anonymously posting something terrible about you?
Well, I mean, if you're not on the site at all, then you don't really see it.
But your friends say you should see what, you know what, guess what I saw?
I think that in order to keep people from posting things anonymously, something that people have to realize is that nothing's anonymous.
Amen.
I mean, at our school, I know we had an incident earlier this year where students thought something was anonymous, and they paid the consequences for it. I mean, come on, it was in no way anonymous. You could put a username in, but that username's associated with your phone or your computer or some site that you've used, and so it's in no way anonymous. I mean, even I know people who use public computers, they think it's anonymous. They track it to the computer, the time it was used, and just look at a picture. Hey, look, there's the person that used it. It's something that no teens tend to realize, and they're just uneducated about it.
Isn't there, why are you uneducated about it?
I personally have been raised to know my way around the internet and bullying and how it's not good. So, I mean, I use Facebook. I don't use Twitter. I don't think Twitter is a good idea. But for Facebook, it's for groups only. It's for trip groups, friends. It's for Sober Squad. It's for the football team. It's just so we can communicate. But for other people, they use it as a site of gossip and a site where they can have private conversations on the side. It's something I've been raised personally to avoid. I don't know how other people deal with it.
And Sarah, you may want to weigh in on this, but you know, we do so much in the schools with drug education, alcohol education, sex education. Surely they are doing things about social media education.
Yes and no. I think in eighth, the kids can answer better. In eighth grade, there was a unit in the course that they were teaching there. But as the Common Core standards are coming along, some of the ninth grade government courses are being looked at as a possibility.
Okay, so some eighth grade and some ninth grade attention being paid to this. But, you know, this is our job, right, Rick?
I was relating back to the social media thing about the bullying. Earlier this year, the sophomores had a day in the EPAC where we had Mr. Kurtz, one of the English teachers, Edina Performing Arts Center. It's our new theater at Edina High School. And Mr. Kurtz talked about his stuttering, and this is the incident. We had a Today's Meet, an anonymous form, which gave people to type in an anonymous username, which gave them almost like power, like a little bit of power over Mr. Kurtz. And it was maybe, 4 to 8 students, and it downhill bad. It was really mean comments about Mr. Kurtz. It was Miss Larson. It was sexual, really bad, swearing comments that just ruined it for everybody. It's just like it's just a little bit of power that they feel just ruins it for everyone.
So it turned out to be a lesson in what a very bad idea this
It was a terrible idea.
I think for social media, it's definitely easier to bully over social media because you avoid kind of physical confrontation and having to speak to someone in person. So, because often people refrain from talking to someone because they won't know how to react if they get a response from them. And if it's over the internet, you don't have to, you have time to process what you want to say. And also, I think, like, even today when I was on Twitter, I saw, normally people talk about cyberbullying being anonymous, but today I saw someone tweeted directly at someone, swearing at them and calling them bad names. And that was kind of a new one for me because I don't normally see the direct, like, tagging someone, like, to talk to them personally about it. But I think that that person did that so that they wouldn't have to face them to deal with that. And I also think that people use social media for bullying as humor, too, to get the support from other people because what they said was funny, and it can appeal to multiple groups who understand what they're trying to bully.
Thank you. 1 minute.
I was just about to say, like, about her, she was talking about Twitter. I just remember how, like, when you go on Twitter, a lot of the times you see tweets where it's like someone's ranting about someone in particular, but you don't know who. And I feel like they feel like that anonymous, oh my God, anonymity. That anonymity kind of gives them power because, like, they feel like they can rant about whoever they want because that person won't know. And it's kind of like, I feel like that kind of anonymity gives them more power, and it gives them more free reign almost.
It's like venting.
Yeah.
When in fact that is the real mark of a coward. Anyone who has ever been a teacher knows the student who says and mutters at you, having turned and walked away from you. And I have frequently gone up to students and said, I would very much like you to say that to my face, or if you don't have the courage to do that, not to say it at all. And of course they don't like that. But yes. Can I just... at one point in the book, he says something about those banal power words: respect, discipline, focus, and strength. And I think a lot of this ranting and raving, which you're saying people try to do anonymously, antidote to much of that are these concepts: respect, discipline, focus, and strength. And much of it is done out of a feeling of powerlessness and cowardice and so on. And the first thing I read every morning, this is true confessions, I go to the advice column. And any of you who are similarly addicted, what I would love is if I had those sentences that she says, well, you've been fighting with this person for 3 years. Why not say this? It's non-confrontational. It's just, hey, let's stop doing this. Or, whoa, wait a minute, that didn't feel good. And it's an I statement. It's not an attack. It's non-confrontational. And maybe one of the things we also need to learn is, a sort of a vocabulary of those kinds of phrases that we can use instead of lashing out with, well, you're stupid too, or something like that, which escalates things and which doesn't work against bullies as much as a, whoa, wait a minute, this really is not feeling good, or something of that sort, which can diffuse it, which can get it to the level of feelings, which is where it's really happening. Okay, you started this, and I'll let you finish it. All right, shall I get her on the far wall, and then you really can finish it as we're running. Yes, please.
There are just a few instances of empathy and tenderness in the book. And those words you read off, it's really empathy and forgiveness. And the revolution to linger and listen on a deeper level. So he does happen in the middle of the night with a young woman to finally offer her his shoulder. And she cries. And that, I think that's, and his son, there's finally forgiveness. And I think that's part of the revolution, the turning of the wheel for his life.
Thank you. Very nice. Yes.
Thank you, Betsy. I think one thing we'd all agree on is that bullying is not limited to either just young boys or young girls. Classic example was the Catherine Stockett book, The Help. Yes. I thought that's worth mentioning because on the surface it's a book about women discriminating against on the basis of race, but as you get into the book it's really about women bullying other women and raising an element of bullying that we didn't get to talk about tonight, but can be very real, and that's organizational bullying. I mean, I suppose the bully who was president of the junior league or whatever it was using her membership to support her position, but they joined in too. So if you're the outlier there, you're not subject to just one person, but a whole organization that can be enforcing its code against you. There are parallels for that in the high school, in the job site, in places where we all are, but not in the library, right? That's good. And not in the high school library either. And not in the Human Rights Relations Commission. Thank you to all of the sponsors who made this evening possible. Thank you to Betsy a great deal. Thank you to the students. You know, we have a major priority of this Edina Reads program, as well as all of our community foundation programs, to have them be intergenerational. We really appreciate your being here tonight to make that happen. And thank you for the participation of the city officials and institutional representatives who have a real voice to add to this conversation. Great evening. Come to our future programs. It's good to see you here. Thank you.